Smashing the Football League title, Football League points record last season, Birmingham City have a bit more than survival on their mind as they return to the Championship at the first attempt. They've got an ownership regime led by Tom Wagner that's got a huge amount of money behind them, and with that comes ambition. They want to be a Premier League club, and that sense of ambition probably extends to manager Chris Davis, because he seems to have changed the mentality of the club with his drive and leadership qualities, and really stamped a clear style of play on this team right from the off last season. And yes, the financial dominance certainly helped behind that, but there are plenty of other factors, and that's why Birmingham City, if they can retain the synergy and togetherness and quality as well in the group that got to 111 points in League One last season, but adding those extra bits of quality. The big question is, can Birmingham City emulate the achievements of Ipswich Town, who won back-to-back promotions from League One to the Premier League? I think that's going to be the ambition for Birmingham City. So what can we expect in 25-26? Plenty to get stuck into then on this Summer Deep Dive. Yes, welcome along to EFL Debate. I'm speaking to a fan of each of the 72 clubs between mid-June and mid-July. So if you want more of that content, you can get subscribed to us on YouTube and on Spotify. Delighted to be joined this afternoon by James, a fantastic content creator on the EFL and especially the Championship with some brilliant threads, and Ryan Deeney from NL Musings on the National League, and also a blog on Birmingham City as well. So, gents, it's a pleasure to be joined by you both. I'm going to come to you first, James. How exciting is this a time to be associated with Birmingham City, either as a fan or in other capacities?
I think it's a really exciting summer. We were talking about this in a group chat the other day about my youth and how I've seen a lot of negative stuff when it comes to Birmingham City, but this is one of the best seasons I can remember. I was excited for last season, but especially after this week with the signings we've made and the evidence that's there from last season. I think last summer it was a case of what could have been with the projection that we were on, but now there's tangible evidence that you can look at and sell to players and to fans alike. So I'm excited for the upcoming season, definitely.
Ryan, just talk to me about the work Tom Wagner has done to just change the feeling around the club over the last couple of years.
If you remember back to post-COVID, and we had half the stadium was unusable. Most of it was dilapidated. We had the training ground burned down. We had the women's team raised, I can't remember exactly the details of it, but the women's team raised grievances over issues that we had. We had the brief flirtation with having a Cat 1 academy, which lasted a year before we dropped off because we financially couldn't do it. Bouncing around freebies and loans every summer. And you look at the difference now, and the stadium is completely different. The match day experience with obviously the club DJ, the fireworks, and all the sort of Americanisms, I guess.
Yeah.
But the difference around the ground, the fan parks that are there, the fact that we're selling out. I mean, you're obviously with us at Wembley. Selling not just the 43,000 or so in the stadium, but they reckon around 50,000 Blues fans were in attendance that day. Bad result, but and that is finally coming to result. The training ground, we've now got the Epic Centre, as well as West Hills being used, I believe, for the women's and the youth teams. That's all been spruced up. So every part of the football club has been spruced up. And now the football team has, caught on a little bit later. But, we broke every record in League One imaginable last year. And this year, the plan is go again. The feeling around the club, we've sold 20,000 season tickets, I believe it is. So, ongoing match days.
I couldn't get one. I actually applied for a season ticket and I got turned down, I suppose, because I'm a journalist and out of the game, so you don't get the loyalty points. But it just shows you, because normally at the past you'd be able to buy a season ticket and you'd have a monopoly of choice over which seat you wanted. So it shows how far we've come.
Yeah, I mean, last year they sent the message out, didn't they? Get one this year because you may not get one last year. And there's always that part of you that still has the seeing is believing. And well, we are seeing and we are absolutely believing now.
Absolutely. James, talk to me about the people kind of running the club on the day-to-day basis, because I suppose Tom Wagner is toing and froing, I guess, between America and England and Birmingham. But I'm wondering, the likes of Craig Gardner as technical director, what do you make of the people who are kind of running the club from an upstairs capacity?
I think we've seen the impacts that they've made. I mean, Ryan touched on how bad the situation was before they came, and Tom Wagner is definitely the front of it, and he's perfect at having the big statements and being that recognisable figure. He's absolutely adored at Blues. But then you've also got Tom Brady is obviously involved in some capacity, although he's not always in the UK. And then, as you mentioned, Craig Gardner, I think, has done an incredible job. I think a lot of people would have expected them maybe to have looked for someone with a bit more experience in that role, considering they said they were looking for the best in class everywhere. But Gardner's clearly done a good job in terms of negotiations for players and the general running. And Jeremy Dale as well as I think he's the CEO, is he? Is that right? Yeah. Dale's done a brilliant job as well. And it's good that even though we've had the Americanization a little bit of the club, we've still got Dale and Gardner, who are both proper Blues people that are in there. You had Gary Cook before that as well. There's still a current of what makes Blues special in the club as well. So I think they've done a really good job of not only improving the on the field, but making fans feel as though they're connected to what's going on higher up as well.
Yeah, that theme of sort of embracing the club's identity, Ryan, I feel like Chris Davis, moving on to him, I think he has done that, but I also think he's brought something unique in the sense that I think he's brought a kind of a winning mentality, and obviously that comes with the results, because if he was acting the same way, but we weren't getting the results last season, I wouldn't be saying this, but I do feel like there's a drive about him. There's a standards that he sets. There's a let's strive to be better. I think that he's done that, and whether I'm slightly biased because of the results that he's delivered, and I'm kind of associating that enjoyment, but it does feel like he's brought something different to the role of Birmingham City manager, and again, that drive and that ambition and those standards that he set has been a key part of that.
Yeah, he came in very much with the aim and willingness to try and change the culture. Now, these are obviously always things that you kind of hear in hearsay, but I recall in the past situations where we had no fines list, we had no real consequences for players not doing things they should have been doing. And you only had to listen to the mid-season review last year with Davis, where we spoke about how one of the key things was being able to get rid of players as much as bringing players in, players that fit the culture that he wants at the club. But also, he said something along the lines of he's never known a football team to collect so few fines during the season, which tells you that he's managed to bring a group together along with the recruitment team that, they turn up on time, they work hard, they clean up after themselves, they do things day in, day out. And that changing culture to a working class team that has a football club, a working class club that has a football team, that, almost delivers those same qualities of turning up on time, doing your job, going home, working as hard as you can. It's a team that now reflects us, and a management team that now reflects us. They work harder than anybody else. And above and beyond everything else, that's all that Blues fans want. That's what we associate ourselves with more. So for all the love of the quality of football, which I'm sure we'll get to, we were the hardest working team last season.
100%.
And that's the difference in the culture and what Davis is trying to bring to us.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we were able, it wasn't just being able to afford individual players of a certain quality. That was a massive part of it, don't get me wrong, but that culture and that work ethic that Chris Davis has instilled was huge. Well, let's have a look at the squad then, gents. James, I wanted to come to you on the goalkeeping department. I'm surprised that I'm saying this because I remember having coffees with you at the Bull Ring and talking about pretty much for much of last season, or certainly first half of last season, we were saying for the championship campaign, the goalkeeping position is definitely the one area that we're going to try and upgrade in. And we have signed another goalkeeper. We've got James Beadle on loan from Brighton after his stints at Sheffield Wednesday. But Ryan Alsop, my God, he won people over, didn't he? In the in the last sort of three quarters of last season, if you like, after a slightly iffy start, and his distribution is crucial to the way we play.
Yeah, I think the distribution is definitely the wow factor with Alsop. Obviously, he made a lot of great saves when called upon, and it's arguably the hardest thing for a goalkeeper to be out of the game for a long period of time when your team are dominant, and then to come alive in those moments when you are called upon. But the distribution is definitely something that very few goalkeepers could emulate. He was almost like our biggest attacking weapon as much as he was a goalkeeper for us. I mean, those long balls to Anderson and Laird, particularly, from being able to turn teams around and make them think twice about stepping onto us really high in a press. But yeah, he's definitely put up an incredible performance last season. And now it seems mad to say that I think me and Ryan are both of the opinion that he won't start on the first day, even if he probably should start and it should be his gloves to lose. I can't see a world where Brighton have loaned us James Beadle and he's going to come in and have to fight for his spot. I think he will definitely be starting on the first day, in my opinion. And I think Beadle as a signing is an interesting one. Initially, my reaction was a bit like, obviously, we've had Bailey pick up Farrell and a lot of goalkeeping errors in the first half of the season. I was a bit hesitant on Beadle. But after looking at him a bit more, I am encouraged by a lot of elements of his game. I think he can make some really good shot stopping, and his distribution might not be to the level of Allsop's, but it's still very impressive. He's got good range in there, good different levels of capabilities, and generally character-wise, I think there's something to work with there. I've seen a few clips of him at Wednesday where he was getting after some of the older pros for a young goalkeeper. But then obviously he did have a tough spell last season. So it remains to be seen how he'll perform. I'm more confident in the fact that Allsop is ready to come in if Beadle did have a shaky start, but we'll see how it pans out.
Ryan?
No, I'm on similar lines. There's a lot to like. There's plenty to, let's say the jury's out. I think similar to James, I'm a bit more confident with the fact that, if ever we lost Allsop last season, Peacock Farrell was stepping in, and to try and be kind about it, he was a goalkeeper that portrayed nervousness around everyone that was around him.
He looked like somebody who's not played much football, and at these kind of levels to our sort of standards, that's going to be a problem, isn't it?
Yeah, whereas this time around, in theory, to start the season, Allsop will be second choice. Beadle's got plenty of experience playing in the Championship now after the last 18 months. I have some concerns about the way he commands his area, and I think one of the challenges might be if, as football fans, we generally tend to care with the goalkeeper what he does as a goalkeeper. Similar to the old adage that a striker is there to put the ball in the net, a goalkeeper is there to kick the ball out of the net. Yeah. And I think fans in general will care more about what he does to protect his own goal than what he maybe does in order to help, to move the ball, to start attacks. And I think the fact that Allsop is so popular means that Beadle will need a good start. I think if there's any shakiness early doors, it could create one of those things with the fan base where, again, there is a nervousness around Beadle playing that perhaps wasn't there when Allsop was in there, and you create that situation that you just don't want. So if he can come in and have a decent start and show that actually, is a good goalkeeper, I think we're on to something. And like I say, if it does go wrong at any point, you've got Allsop that is there to come in, step in, take the number one shirt again, and you feel a lot more confident with that because you know that he's been there, done it, and his experience and his passing ability is, something that will calm people down.
Yeah, I think one thing that I would make the argument for in favour of Beadle, I agree with you. I can definitely see that pressure cooker thing where if he makes a few mistakes early doors, there is going to be that fan base baying for a popular figure like Allsop. But what I do quite like is that he's had a couple of seasons at championship level now, or certainly 18 months. And so I think that's going to help him. And young goalkeepers, they're likely to get better. So I think he's had a solid start to the championship. I think he's also, we won the England Euro under 21, didn't he, as well with England. So I would hope that he's going to improve and sort of benefit from that early experience he's had in the championship. I want to move on to right back, James, where we've got Ethan Laird, who actually I think initially there was a feeling that we played better when Taylor Gardner-Hickman was starting at right back in the first half of the season. But then in the second half of the season, it felt like Laird just went on another level and was one of our most important players.
Yeah, I think Laird's improvement. I was at Wigan on just after New Year's, I think that was, on like the 4th of January, something like that. And that was kind of the making of him. He got 2 assists that day. He was absolutely brilliant. And since then, he hasn't really looked back. He's improved tenfold in terms of his delivery, and even his defending, I think, has come on since then. I think there was always a question of him at both ends. I think between the boxes, he's always been a brilliant athlete and someone that can progress the ball and take his man on. But it's always that end delivery and the defensive aspects. At Shrewsbury, particularly, I think he got exposed on that day earlier in the season. So I think there's been a few occasions where you've questioned his ability in both boxes, but he's definitely improved, and he made that spot his own towards the end, popped up with a lot of goals and assists toward the end of the season. And then you've got Samstead and Taylor Gardner-Hickman in there as well, who have both been fine deputies when they've come in, but I don't think either have really set the world alight there. I think Taylor Gardner-Hickman is more of a utility player rather than confining him to one spot. That's where his use has come. And Samstead, I've really liked him in terms of character in the squad. And almost the patience he's had to wait for his opportunities. I think Davies has spoken about how good his attitude's been and still being a dedicated professional, even though he had to wait so long for a start. But I'm not sure that either of those will challenge Laird, which is why I'm quite excited by the signing of Asai Samuel this morning.
Yeah, Ryan, I wanted to ask you about that because I recognised Asai Samuel much more as a speedy wide forward who likes to get in among the goals. But maybe he's reinvented himself in his time in Turkey as more of a utility player on the wing, where he can play as a winger, he can play as a right back or as a wing back. And I suppose in terms of our system, that would suit the right back role, because whereas it's a team sheet right back, they're basically almost like the way Ethan Laird plays, it's basically like a winger, because it's an in possession. Let me make sure I get this right. 3-2, 3-2-3-1 or something along those lines. Not sure I've quite got that. 3-2-4-1 maybe.
4-1.
There you go. Thank you. Oh my goodness. So it's that kind of role where you've got lots of attacking freedom.
Yeah, essentially the right back and the left winger last year had the flank to themselves, and that's the way we worked. So, I don't know. I suppose probably parallels with, not to jump on obviously the tag of this pod now, but probably similarities to maybe Ipswich, where it's the left back and the right winger, and obviously we had the right back and the left winger. I think. Yeah, the one thing with Asai Samuel is going to be the power that he brings down that right-hand side. It wouldn't surprise me if at some point he is utilised as a winger. Obviously, we had Gardner-Hickman sort of doing the rounds, bouncing here, there and everywhere last season. But yeah, I'd imagine it might become a straight shootout between Asai Samuel and Laird, just for that right-back spot, to provide that real, athleticism, speed, 1v1 ability down that right hand side, to give us something a little bit different to a lot of the sort of natural technical footballers that we have in the middle of the park. Asai Samuel, I haven't seen too much of him in Turkey because I've got only a certain finite amount of time during the day. But it does seem like he makes a lot of underlapping runs, a lot of overlapping runs, so he might give us a little more in terms of a little more fluidity sort of down that right hand side as and when he plays. Obviously a little bit more experience as well. I think it's easy to forget that Ethan Laird is, he's still only 23, still learning. So we've got two guys there that, if they're sharing minutes throughout the season, I think a lot of Championship clubs would like to have them as their right backs. So the positive for me, positive addition, and hopefully works out.
Yeah, that underlapping run, James. I think Ethan Laird did that against Leyton Orient, where you've got the sort of the right winger actually staying wide, even though typically they operate as the second 10, and allowing Ethan Laird to cut inside. I think it was against Orient, where he scored that lovely goal, playing a 1-2 with somebody. So it's definitely a passage of play that we can utilise, isn't it?
Yeah, I think Asai Samuel's had a lot of versatility from what I gather in his time at Fenerbahce. He's played as a wing back, as an out-and-out full-back as well. And I think, like Ryan said, his run variation really impressed me in terms of he'd be able to, as you say, work well with a 10 kind of player, like a Kieran Dowell or a Williamson, someone like that off the right-hand side. Or if we went with a traditional winger and we signed an out-and-out right winger, then maybe he can provide those underlapping runs and make runs a bit more centrally. What really stood out to me as well is I kind of expected him to be a bit more of an attacking fullback, as you said, he's a winger from his time in England, but his defensive work really stood out to me. He was very impressive in the duels, and riding contact was really good, being able to bring the ball out from deep phases. So I think physically he's definitely what we've been lacking. And as Ryan said, if it's him and Laird and you're a fullback, you've got one of them starting for the first 70 minutes and then the other coming on for the last 20 minutes. That's an absolute nightmare to play against that, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. That does really surprise me, actually, that his defensive work stood out. So he's clearly done a lot of growing in Turkey. In terms of central defence then, gents, coming to you on this, right? Christoph Clara obviously played as the right centre-back throughout last season. However, one thing I'm slightly apprehensive about is that if we play the same full-back system where you've got a Laird or a Asai Samuel flying forward and Cochrane tucking in from the left, that means that Clara would be the outside centre half in possession, and it would risk at Championship level, where you're going to face some quick attackers, exposing him in those 1v1 scenarios, which might not play to his strengths, even if he's unbelievable at pretty much everything else. So I'm wondering if you think Newman's been brought in to play as the right centre half and Clara could move to the left centre back in the team sheet and actually be the middle centre back in possession.
I think you're forgetting that Clara has a simple solution to any quick winger that comes down the outside, which is just launch them over the hoardings. I'm very confident Phil Newman's probably going to take that right centre half role. I think Clara will tuck into the centre, and then obviously it remains to be seen what the left back situation is, but I think that's the way it'll work. And then we've still got Christian Bielik who's around, and then obviously one more centre half position to fill, assumedly. I'm not going to lie, I had a moment, a lot of last season, to be fair, as James probably knows, where I thought we might end up with Newman possibly playing as a right back, tucking in and having an out-and-out right winger. But the Asai Samuel signing makes me think that maybe we are, Newman is very much coming in as a centre half. And presumably it'll be him and Clara playing in the middle of the defence together, which in terms of physicality is definitely a bonus. But I suppose it remains to be seen how well they work as a pair and what other centre half we bring into.
I mean, there is still the option that Asai Samuel could play further forward and Newman plays right back. So, but I would be surprised if Chris Davis wants to, certainly from the start of the season, wants to change formation and disrupt too much of what's working well. I wanted to ask you, James, about the centre half position, and I guess whether you've been able to get some research in on Newman. The intel that I've had so far is he's a very big lad and he's very quick. So that's certainly going to be very helpful for him if he is in those kind of 1v1 duels as an outside centre half.
Yeah, I haven't caught too much of him just because footage from Bundesliga 2 in terms of full 90 seems to be a bit more difficult to come by. But I very much agree with that. I think he'll be the right centre-back on paper and then he'll move into that right centre-back role in the 3 in possession, which is very much where he's been for Hanover as a wide centre-back in a more traditional back 3, but still occupying those kind of zones. And with his speed and stuff, he'll be able to step into the channel if needs be, recover, going back the other way. I think he's able to get forward himself as well. As we saw Clara bring the ball out quite often when we had more possession in those games and drive over the halfway line. I think Newman will definitely be able to do that. And then that will protect Clara a bit more, being in the middle of the three in possession with his pace. And then, as Ryan mentioned, Alex Cochrane being the left back that tucks in. We'll see whether we end up going for another left back or whether Cochrane is the man that's trusted there. And I'm still a big fan of Bielik personally as an alternative to Clara coming in to be that middle centre-back kind of role. I think that would suit Bielik again if Clara were to get injured. And then we'll see. I think there's been links to Ben Davies again, whether we end up re-signing him. But then that would kind of worry me a little bit if Newman was to pick up a knock or an injury and then you're forced with one of Clara or Bielik playing as an outside centre-back.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think certainly one more centre-half would make a lot of sense. Let's move on to left-back then, Ryan, because you've got Alex Cochrane there, but Lee Buchanan, I think you told me this, he's out until New Year. So I'm wondering whether a 6-month loan, because whether you'd want to make another long-term investment and a third left-back might be a bit excessive. So I think a loan would suit us quite nicely in that position.
I'm going to guess it depends on the kind of option that comes available. The one thing I'm conscious of, as James has just alluded to, is that Bielik, Clara and Davis, they're not the quickest players. And Cochrane, while he can run, isn't the strongest over long distances. So I do wonder whether we could do with maybe someone a little more physical there, just in terms of that balance. I mean, it might be that they don't play regularly. Obviously, it depends who we sign. But I do get the impression we'll probably sign someone. I mean, Cochrane was likely ahead of Buchanan anyway in terms of the 11. That was becoming clear in pre-season before Buchanan got injured. This current injury, I think it's a case of let's see how he comes back, because I don't know who's seen it. I don't really want to describe it, but the injury he suffered against Blackpool and the way he landed it, like he's probably going to be out for a full calendar year, and it's we'll see how he recovers, and hopefully he does well. But in the meantime, I'd imagine we probably will sign another left back for the season or permanently to compete with Cochrane and just try and step up once again. Yeah, I just think that physicality in terms of defence, I know primarily it'll be a focus on what we do with the ball, but we obviously also have to be mindful of what's coming behind. Yeah, but we'll see what comes in there. But I do think we'll sign someone either for the season or sign someone permanently.
Yeah, a bit of a focus on defensive transitions. Well, let's look at midfield then. I loved Paik and Iwata last season. They're absolute joy to watch. The metronomic qualities that Iwata brings, James, where he kind of keeps play ticking over and sets the tempo, and then Paik with the way that he roams and's got such a graceful touch, and between them they complement each other so nicely. And yeah, I expect them to do big things in the Championship.
Yeah, I think it was really evident that they were almost too good to be at that level. They were a perfect pair from almost the first game. And Iwata caught the eye with the goals that he scored, especially right from the off when he joined. But I think Paik was just as pivotal to the entire team. His intelligence and being able to carry out the instructions that Chris Davies wants. I think that's what Paik can bring you, with obviously the schooling he's had at Barcelona and stuff earlier in his career. I think he's a lovely footballer to watch, and both of them will definitely have a big part to play this season. Obviously now you've got Tommy Doyle coming in as well, which kind of complicates matters a bit. But I think, yeah, both will feature heavily, even if they're not the two that end up starting all the games.
Ryan, one slight, as much as I love Paik and Iwata and would wholeheartedly back them to make that step up to the Championship very successfully, there's also part of me that's, and I think we discussed this at Wembley, they're maybe missing that kind of extra physical option in midfield, because you've got Paik and Iwata, who both rely on other qualities rather than physicality. And then Tommy Doyle, I think he's 5'8", the lad on loan from Wolves. One promotion, of course, or Sheffield United from this level. But is that the one thing that you're sort of a little bit unsure about in terms of central midfield?
Yeah, thing is, the one thing I'm wary of with the Batter and Peck is that they were unbelievable for part of the season, and then the small cracks we started to see maybe through March and April time also coincided with the fact that we only had, if you exclude the international breaks, and you got to bear in mind that Peck went away for, I think, 3 of the 4 during the season with South Korea, we only had 4 full weeks without a game last season, from the start of the season to the end of the season. So no doubt part of that was probably a physical and mental, fatigue as well. So it'd be interesting to see how they get on now. They're sort of stepping back in, they're fresh, they're having a full pre-season. You've obviously got Doyle in, who provides, it seems mad to suggest that Doyle might not start given how good he is, and I think that kind of shows the quality of the options we've got available. And then in terms of that defensive midfield spot, I mean, it might be that we try and bring in another and Doyle plays that position. It could be that it's a difficult one to sort of get a handle on, really. But having someone who can maybe just provide that extra physicality at times, maybe we had it a couple of times where Bielik stepped into midfield when we were, struggling for midfielders for a little period. Both Iwata and Peck were out, and Bielik stepped into that defensive midfield role, and it was just a case of sit in front of the defence, be a big figure, keep it simple, give us a hand on set pieces, and maybe that is something we look at as the alternative defensive midfielder.
He's not mobile enough, though. I don't think Bielik can midfield.
I don't think Bielik will play there. I think we'll try and sign someone to do that. But yeah, I think we will try and add a 4th midfielder. And unfortunately, it means Mark Lennon's probably going to be the one that ends up going, because Gardner-Hickman is so, unbelievably versatile.
Yeah.
Which feels a shame, because he's probably good enough to play in the Championship. But I think that's kind of the level we're recruiting to now, which is it's just genuinely exciting. But we're kind of sat here already thinking, what's the situation with Iwata, Peck and Doyle? Can we play all 3 of them together? Which one's going to drop out? And it's hard to picture one of them not playing, which again, shows the level we're recruiting to now.
Certainly does. James, do you agree with Ryan that maybe one more physical, athletic profile in midfield, or do you think maybe Taylor Gardner-Hickman can be that, not so much in terms of size, but in terms of that aggression, I suppose, that he brings?
I do agree with Ryan. I think we'll be looking for another one definitely to come in, whether that is for the 8 role and Doyle and Iwata are kind of the 2 for the 6 role, or whether we go for a bigger kind of physical presence, which is what I'd like to see, definitely. I think Leonard will definitely make way, which is a shame, as Ryan touched on. And Gardner-Hickman, I think he'll have his uses throughout the season. It'll definitely be gap filling for a lot of it, and then coming off the bench and bringing energy in midfield. When he has played there, I think he's been more the driving force rather than the sitting midfielder. But yeah, I'd like to see someone with a bit more stature in the midfield, a bit of legs in there. But it's difficult to imagine Iwata and Peck and Doyle on the bench, as Ryan said. So maybe if we do end up with 2 of those 3 playing, then there will have to be cover through tactical alterations. Maybe one of the outside centre-halves is tasked with stepping into midfield if we're caught in transition, or with Asai Samuel's pace, whether he can make runs kind of diagonally across to cover the centre of the pitch if we're caught in transition. I think Davies will definitely have a way of safeguarding the shortcomings of some of the players that we have in there.
I think on Gardner-Hickman, he's one of those players, whereas the other 3 are very, very comfortable with their back to play, just to keep moving the ball and be constantly aware. I think Gardner-Hickman's strength is being able to see the play and being able to play longer. It's not that he can't do the short stuff, just in comparison to the guys that he's been competing against, I think he's better off. Like when he's played that left centre midfield role and pops out to the left and can come back in on his right foot, his ability to play the forward passes and play the longer passes is excellent. And it's just maybe the shorter and sharper stuff that he's still got to work on, which again is another one. He's not long turned 23, so he's still a young lad learning the game and hasn't played that much in centre midfield, which is why I think it's more likely that he'll probably play wider and, as James says, gap fill. And we probably bring in an extra centre midfielder in there.
Yeah, possibly one more midfielder to come in then. One thing I do feel like we're missing, I don't know if you agree with this, James, is maybe a left-footed, right-sided player who can basically interchange well with Laird or Asai Samuel, because at the moment we've got Cashy Anderson, who's right-footed and more of a sort of direct winger. Hanson's more of a left-sided player. We've got Dimmy Gray, who's right-footed and more of a direct profile anyway. I think what we need is somebody who can play on the right, who's left-footed, but who's very creative and can become that second 10.
Yeah, definitely. I think obviously we've seen links to Kieran Dowell again and Fujimoto as well, who are both kind of the same profile in terms of more of a 10 that start wider and then come infield and operate as that second 10. But I would like to see someone with a bit more of a winger profile just to give us a bit of versatility. I think we've both mentioned Rak-Saki. I think he'd be a brilliant addition if we could find someone that's a wire player by trade but comfortable in kind of inside spaces. So I'd like to see that, but I do wonder with the links to both Fujimoto and Dowell whether we're going to stay with more of a 10 that can start wider. But yeah, both of them left-footed. I think that's definitely key to kind of open up the pitch a little bit more. We've seen that with Paik drifting into the left flank with his right foot. Yeah, you definitely need different angles to be able to open up the game for us when you've got Asai Samuel going on the outside. But yeah, I'd like to see a bit of variation. Just if we bring in more of an out-and-out winger and an inside 10, we can kind of change depending on the game, because almost every game we had last season, we were the dominant team with the ball. And whilst that will probably be the case for 75% of the games, there probably will be games when we're going away to teams like Ipswich, Southampton, Sheffield United, where you're going to spend a greater portion of the game without the ball. We saw that in the second half at Wrexham away, where we're kind of pegged in a little bit more, and you want someone to just be able to break the mold a little bit and someone carry the ball forward. I think that's what we're missing off that right-hand side.
Ryan, you were smiling to yourself earlier.
It's all right, because you mentioned that, and there is currently conversation going on social media about the fact that Fujimoto may be very close, and there's obviously the continued link to Dowell. So James has already covered it, but yeah, just as you were saying, it sounds like there are certain things that are closing in to basically solve the issue that you're literally talking about right now. So yeah, just give me a bit of a smile.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know an awful lot about Fujimoto. I'm not going to pretend to know too much about him. I'm very much, let's see what they're like in the show before we judge them too much. I'll leave the expert stuff to James and guys like Ben at Blues Breakdown to fill me in on there. With Dowell, he did well for us last year. Davis is a fan. He's physically enough to handle himself. I don't think he's someone that, if he starts every game, then fair enough. If he doesn't start every game and sort of comes in for a run of 15 starts out of 18 games, then I don't think I'll be particularly bothered. Very intelligent footballer, a little bit inconsistent at times, but if we're going to bring those two in, then also having Iwata, Peck, Doyle, possibly Willemson still around, it's not a bad midfield group to have, really. I do agree with James, and I realise we're probably going to get to it, but obviously at the moment, our wide options are Gray, Anderson, Hanson, who had real troubles with injury last season, and Scott Wright, who's another one that probably won't play in the game this year. Just to touch on a point that James made there, when we played Newcastle in the Cup, we started with both Wright and Anderson on either side, rather than having the full back down one side. And it also happened against Reading for all of 5 minutes before Wright took his really bad knee injury. So there have been games where we have been willing to play out and out wingers on either side. So I suspect it's something we're going to look at, while probably also trying to make sure we filled those central areas as well, just to give ourselves that little bit of an option. And maybe if we do reach those periods of the season where we've had a lot of games in close succession, while we have got the flexibility to maybe switch Asai Samuel and Laird now, which gives us a little bit more athleticism on the right, giving ourselves that ability to maybe just give them a breather. Let's say Laird's out for a month and Asai Samuel has to start 5 games in 2 weeks. You want to give them a little bit of a breather if you can. So it just gives us that little bit of flexibility to start, a winger on both sides, and maybe come onto the play a bit more, rather than always having to play the same way and always sort of exposing the same gaps as tired legs maybe come about.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So then I'm wondering, are we thinking Jimmy Gray's going to start on the left wing? Because he's. I'm curious to see whether we'll have that thing where the left winger hugs the touchline, or whether Jimmy Gray's going to want to cut inside and show more of a danger in those sort of advanced central areas.
I think there'll be some fluidity there. I think we saw signs of it towards the end of the season. Peck is very good with that left-hand channel, making forward runs, playing the ball forward. We saw Cochrane start to get a bit more excitable towards the end of the season in making those sort of inside runs. I'd imagine he'll probably hold the touchline in general play, and then as things develop, we'll see a bit more fluidity there. And I think that'll be the challenge this season. Maybe at times last year we were very stuck. Again, this comes down to training time and players learning on the job. Again, we didn't have that much training time on the training pitch last season, but you saw things slowly start to develop. So, for example, Peck started to come out to the left-hand side and then started to play a little bit further up on the left-hand side. That sort of 3-2-4-1 kind of developed more in towards more of like a 3-1-4-2, where we maybe had two up top and, the two advanced midfielders essentially. And it's just little tweaks like that we saw for the season. I'd imagine that someone who's been around like Gray has, and someone as intelligent as Anderson is, it's hard to understate how intelligent he is as a footballer in terms of the roles he picks up, and obviously how hard he works. And I think it will just give us a little bit of flexibility down there. So yeah, probably holding in general play, but with a bit more fluidity in our game as and when we're playing, in the final third.
James, the number 10 position I'm really curious about as well, because there's a feeling that Willem started last season on fire, scored some lovely goals and brought some great link-up play. Maybe his form dipped a little bit and sort of inconsistency crept in, and there was a criticism that he maybe didn't use his physicality as well as some people might have liked. We've not brought in a classic number 10 yet, although maybe again, like Ryan mentioned, that could be in the offing. But do you think that Willemsen has a chance of becoming of keeping his place in the first 11, or do you think it's going to be difficult for him to do that?
I think if he's still here come the first game of the season, around then, he'll be given the chance, in my opinion. I think Davies values his stature, even if he's not the most physical. And I think we saw in the early parts of the season and the last few games of the season what he can do when he's playing with facing the goal and he's on confident form. I think where we saw his shortcomings were probably the amount of games he had to play. Whenever he played in around January, I think after his injury, he came back and he played almost 90 minutes every single game that he played in. He's rarely taken off just because of his ability from defensive corners and things like that, especially when Lyndon Dykes was out. We didn't really have someone to bring on and kind of take that burden off Willemsen. So there's definitely more to come from Willemsen for me. I wouldn't be surprised if they get an offer close to what they paid for him, if they were willing to cut their losses and, move him on quickly and look to bring in someone else. But I think Davies does like him. He persisted with him so often, and he's clearly an intelligent footballer. And if we can get him doing what he does best, which for me is running on the last line and running towards goal, then there is definitely more to come from him. He just needs to work on crashing the box a bit more, using his physicality and his size. And I think that's natural as well when players that haven't played in England before then maybe need a little bit of adjustment. It doesn't have to be instantly he's going to be a perfect fit for us. Maybe now he's had a year, he'll come back fresh pre-season, get himself up a bit of confidence. Maybe then he'll kind of start the season in the form he did last year. And if he can do that, work in a bit more space and run towards goal a bit more often, then there's definitely a great player there.
My favourite narrative with Willemsen last year was that he had to play as the central attacking midfielder when most of his goals came, when he was playing as that inside right. And the narrative got around that he was starting to struggle because, he was playing as a right winger, and then he came back, played regularly as a, sort of the second striker, and didn't do an awful lot towards the end of the season. So I'm curious how that goes this season.
Yeah, for sure. Really curious season ahead for Willemsen. One component to this, I'd like to ask you, James, is Jay Stansfield, because as much as I think Jay Stansfield has enormous potential, just won the Euro under 21s with England, of course. Fantastic presser, really real athlete, isn't he? Very relentless in the way that he goes about things against the ball, quick and strong, and can get in behind, and a good finisher in those situations as well. At the same time, I think Ryan mentioned to me that 7 of his 10 open play goals last season came when he was alongside, came when either Jutkiewicz or Dykes were on the pitch. And seeing as Dykes is expecting to be on the periphery this season and Jutkiewicz has retired from playing, I'm wondering whether there's a possibility that we might bring in an experienced, physical, industrious centre forward as an option to be a focal point and leave the door open for Stansfield to maybe play off the right, perhaps, or play as a 10, or play off the left in a kind of inside forward or second striker role.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see him not playing as that out-and-out forward as often as he did last season anyway. I think, like you mentioned, the goals that he came with were partly to do with defenders being dragged away from him with Dykes. There was one goal, I think, in the Virtue Trophy where Dykes made a brilliant run and took the defender away, and then Stansfield ran in and scored. And that kind of summed up what Dykes did for him. And I think that was an underrated aspect of Dykes' game, really, is that his value isn't going to come in the goals tally. It's going to be in what he does for the other players. I think with Stansfield, there will be less scenarios this season where he's the sole striker stood between 3 centre-halves in the opposition box. That will probably occur less. I wouldn't be surprised to see us bring in, I think we've been linked to Kyogo Furuhashi, and a striker that, even though they're not the most physical, they're a bit of a specialist in terms of low touches and playing in between centre-halves, not looking to come and get involved in play. And almost how we tried to blend Alfie May and Jay Stansfield earlier in the season with 2 strikers, Stansfield being perhaps the deeper one, and then someone that's a bit less touch involved being the focal point for Blues. But I wouldn't be surprised to see a bigger presence come in. I'd really like to see us be able to mix it up a little bit and go longer. And whether that is Lyndon Dykes, if he does stay and he's the best option we've got in terms of that mould, I think he'll do a job. He's a fine championship player. He'll win duels. I think before he came, he'd won like the most duels in the last few seasons in the championship. If he is needed to play, then he will. If we play to his strengths, he'll do a job. I think Chris Davies used him behind Stansfield as well at points last season, just to kind of get that physical presence in there. But I would like to see us bring in someone that's a bit more specialist in that role, and will be able to combine the physical elements and their technical aspects as well.
What do you think, Ryan? Do you think Jay Stansfield will be Birmingham City's number 9 this season, or do you think there's a possibility he might there might be a different forward role for him?
I'll be honest, it's hard to say at the moment. Here's my thing with Stansfield. He's the type of forward who is explosive and instinctive. And when he's got very little time to think, he just reacts and is brilliant with it. I mean, the goal against Bradford in the semi-final, the goal against Charlton, a couple of sort of his poacher goals last season, playing off someone, like he's one of those players that he does things instinctively. And I think part of the problem with that number 9 role, as James mentions as well, he's heavily marked last season when you've got teams that are sat in their own box playing 5 at the back.
Sure.
But I think part of the problem with that number 9 is you've essentially got your back to goal and you've got to be aware of so much of your surroundings. Whereas I think Stansfield's the type of forward that just wants to come onto the ball, get down the sides of defenders, and just do things naturally. So I think that attacking midfield role is going to be an interesting one, or maybe even the sort of guy that comes inside from the right, where one of them in theory is going to have to play that sort of selfless, almost target man style role where they're the ones that bring everyone into play. And, the Stansfield can almost just sort of float in and around them, make runs off them, and sort of work based on what other players are doing. I I don't know whether that's a number. Not. I mean, even last season when he played up front with Dogs for a period, there were times where Dogs was the 10, where Dogs was the number 9, and Stansfield was off him, as James mentioned. Yeah, and I suppose there's always the element as well of we are going to sign quality footballers. So as much as we paid the big fee for Stansfield and we all love him, he's also going to have to find his own role within the team. I think the big plus for Stansfield will be sort of going back to the start of this, Davis's team work harder than anyone else. And as we saw at the Euro under 21, Stansfield's work rate is incredible.
Yeah.
And so long as he's in the team and pressing and, crashing into people, it's going to bring more out of everyone else around him. So I almost think regardless, Stansfield will probably find a role in the team, even if he's not scoring the goals as the number 9. I think he may potentially just play that role because of the work that he puts in, which brings more out of everyone else and gets everyone else moving with him too.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I suppose, James, we've not really spoken about Keshi Anderson yet, and he's someone who has versatility going for him because he can play on either side. Tricky, really hard-working winger. Do you think that there is going to be a place for Keshi Anderson in this squad? Because we don't want to completely overhaul things and bring in too many players and sort of mess up the dynamic. That, let's not forget, we're talking about trying areas to improve, but this is a group of players that got 111 points last season.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's important to strike that balance between improving on what we've got, but also maintaining the core and the elements of the side that made us so successful last season. I think Keshi Anderson had it really tough with injury when he first came to Blues, but there were still performances in that first championship season when we got relegated where I think of Coventry and Norwich, games like that, where he was really impressive. He showed his physical elements, and when his body is in a place where, I think Ryan touched on it earlier, his intelligence, when his body's in a place that it can keep up with the footballing brain that he's got, and he's a really dangerous footballer, and the fitness that he's got from last season shows that he's really dangerous when he's got both those components working simultaneously. I personally think it'll be an interesting battle between him and Gray. I think whilst Gray's got the pedigree, I'm not sure it's as simple as Gray will walk in and just keep the left wing spot. I think the attitude of all the players that have played this season, you think of Laird, of Paik, of Allsop, of Anderson, that we've all brought in players that can play in their roles so far, but I don't think any of them will take it lying down. I think there'll definitely be a battle for all those roles between them. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Anderson start on the first game, maybe even Laird start on the first game as well. Obviously, both Asai Samuel and Gray are going to have pre-seasons. That maybe complicates that a little bit, but I wouldn't be surprised to see quite a few of the 11 from this season start on that first game against Ipswich, just to maintain a little bit of continuity. And then maybe if they perform well for the first few, they kind of keep the new lads out until they lose their shirt.
I completely agree with you, James, because I think you don't want to almost try and solve problems before they've actually happened. I think you want to give the synergy and the togetherness of the group that achieved what they did last season in place and just run with that and let that breathe a little bit. And then maybe you might think we need a few solutions here and you've got players in reserve to bring in. But I agree with you. I think the players who got 111 points last season deserve to be in the team for this year. And then you have your solutions up your sleeve.
Yeah, I think... go on, James.
Even last season, I was going to say at the start of the season, Christoph Clara came in and Chris Davies gave Dion Sanderson the chance to play himself out of the team, essentially, which is what happened. But Clara was sat on the bench for a few games at the start of the season when he came in. That might be to do with the fact that he maybe wasn't at the right fitness level because he'd come in a bit later, or there's a lot of factors go into that. But I don't think Davies, I think he is cutthroat, but I don't think he'll abandon the players that have got him to this point so far. I think they'll all be given their chance to impress. And personally, I think Keshi Anderson will rise to the challenge, whether he plays more games than Gray, whether Gray plays more than him. I think both that left wing spot, it'll be a case of who starts and who finishes rather than who's the first choice, who's the second choice.
Yeah, I was going to make exactly the same point. The fact that started last season, if I remember correctly, Sanderson, Miyoshi, and Dembele all started that first game. Two of them, three of them actually were dropped for the following game, weren't they? Because Sanderson got sent off in the Cup, so Clara had to start.
Yes.
But I think all three of them were basically dropped for the next game because things didn't quite go right against Reading, and they played well in the Carling Cup when they got the chance. So it just shows that, you know, in the summer you always get excited by the new shiny toy, don't you? But and I think it's also tempting as well, as we spoke about earlier. You look at your starting 11 and just sort of think, well, he's not going to start now, so where's he going to go? But if you look, last season we had a very good season in terms of availability. But even if you look at our starting 11, there's 130 games that weren't started by what you'd probably call our strongest 11. That's 130 games that need to be filled by other members of the squad. So the guys like Anderson, let's say Willemsen, let's say, Peck if Doyle gets the nod, let's say Cochrane and Bielik and so on, they're still going to play a lot of games. They're still going to be heavily involved. They're still going to play from the bench. It's up to them to basically make the starting 11 spot their own. And I don't think it's as clear cut for the guys that are coming in that, they are going to be the first choice. And I think that's, David spoke about it a lot last season. We were going to play 60 games and everyone needed to, play their part in that. I think when it comes to this season, although we probably won't play as many games unless we do go on and win the FA Cup, these guys are still going to have to step up when they're called upon. You play 5 games in 2 weeks, or you've got a Christmas period where you've got 12 games in 4 days or 5 days, whatever it is. This is why you have a squad. So Anderson will play. I'd imagine Anderson will be quite heavily involved, even if he's not starting every week. He'll be heavily involved in the squad because he's so reliable, so hardworking, and if anything, he might actually help. Not having to rely on him so much. So those hamstrings and calves are a bit, bit tighter or a bit looser. Yeah, get the right word.
Are we looking at another 5 or 6 editions? Do you think, James?
I think there's still a lot of work to be done. I think the goalkeeper department is pretty much done for me.
Yeah.
There was another link earlier to a right back from Portugal, but for me, I'd say the right back again, pretty much done. I wouldn't be surprised to see someone go out there just because of the squad rules. Then one more centre half. I think another left back personally, just because I'm not sure on Lee Buchanan with 2 big injuries now, how much you can rely on him. Just because as well, Alex Cochrane, obviously his availability was incredible last season, but is that going to catch up with him this season, that he had such a physical toll on him? Is he going to potentially have more spells out this season as a result? I'd like to see one more midfielder. Right wing we've spoken about, whether that's an out-and-out winger or inside 10, maybe 1 or 2 more there. Definitely a striker, maybe another 10 as well. So I don't know how many I've just named them, but quite a lot of positions still to go. And there'll still be some players that leave as well. A lot of work to be done in terms of the outgoings too, just to make sure we get under that. Is it 25, I think, is the number for the squad spots? So for me, I've got that as 2 in every position and then 1 Taylor Gardner-Hickman spot.
He's got his own spot. So where was I? Expectations for the season. Now, I think expectations for Birmingham City is probably going to differ, Ryan, depending on who you talk to, because I think as a fan base, I think we'd probably be quite happy to finish in the top 10. And I don't know when we last finished in the top 10 of the Championship, it might have been the Gary Rowett season, I think, possibly 15-16. You what?
Higher. I think the expectation is going to be top 6 this year, minimum.
Really, even from the fan base, not even from the board?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
I think once we sign the players that we're supposed to sign, and once we sit there with the squad that we've got, I think the expectation will be top 6 this season. But I think that also comes from the fact that the board have been quite open in. I think, was there a thing like a OS Sports Club thing the other day where Gardner basically said, the aim is promotion? And I think because the noise comes from then obviously you get, your core fans that are sort of sending out the message saying, the aim is promotion. And I think the fan base, naturally you go with your owners, don't you? If your owners are sitting there saying, we've got all this revenue coming, we're bringing all these exciting players in, I think it'll be top 6 minimum. And I think the aim is very much, go back to back, which it's ballsy to come out and say it. But I suppose the situation is what it is. There's no point trying to play it down or hide from it, especially when our owners aren't doing it. We've got a very good budget. While I don't think the wages are quite as exciting as people are probably led to think, they're certainly very competitive wages for this level and probably top 6 wages. So I've got no doubt that, the aim, particularly once we add an extra couple of players and people start realising the squad we've got and the depth we've got. I think also as well, when you look at, I don't want to start talking for other clubs, when you look at the issues Leicester have got, when you look at the amount of work that Southampton still need to do and how many sort of younger lads they've got, when you look at the changeover at Sheffield United, obviously there are other clubs that are trying to breach that, but not many that sort of stand out. And I think when you look at the clubs that sort of run around the playoff positions last year, I think when we compare our squad and sort of everything else we've got going on with us, compared to what has been in and around there, I think the aim will very much be, top 6 minimum, and really going on with the club. I think, the expectation will probably get as close to promotion as possible. I'm not sitting here saying we are going to win promotion. I think there's more work to do, but that is the expectation. Like I say, there's no point hiding away from it. Is there? If that's what the owner and DOF are saying, there's no point shying away from it.
I mean, James, there's part of me that thinks if we just missed out on the playoffs by a few places, but we improved as the season went on, and we went into the next season with a group of players that we're really excited about, I don't think that would be a bad season necessarily. But I think from my point of view as a fan, I think my minimum expectation for the season is top 10. That's not to say that I think we should be targeting top 10, but that would be the kind of the minimum bar that I would set. But I also see a world where we could do an Ipswich, which is why I've titled the podcast that. And I do think we've got a great chance of finishing the top 6 as well.
Yeah, I think it's difficult, isn't it, to get that balance between expectations and you letting yourself get carried away a little bit. I think a lot of the older core of the fan base kind of abides by those more traditional views. My dad, when we came down last season, was very tentative about the idea of us just going straight back up, even though we invested so heavily. And I think Ipswich is obviously the very recent example, which probably makes it feel more doable, but no one had done that for 10 years before that, since Southampton or something.
Norwich, I think, also around that time.
Yeah. So I think it's definitely a difficult ask. And as you say, it's difficult when you look at the table and you say, oh, so-and-so are going to finish 7th and so-and-so are going to finish 4th, because that in reality could be 2 points between those spots, or we could end up having a really good season, being right in the mix for the playoffs, and then end up coming 9th just because of the last day or the last 2 game weeks go against you or something. So I think how the owners view the season will depend on how it feels along, rather than the finish itself, as much as that's important. If Davies has a great season, we get a bit of misfortune and then we end up slipping a little bit away from where we would like to be, then there'll probably be a bit of context taken into the decision. But like Ryan said, I think they'll definitely be aiming to get in the top 6. When you look at the squads in and around there, we should be challenging ourselves to compete with them. And as Ryan mentioned, there's a lot of issues with some of the other sides there. I think our home form is incredible, and I'd back us against anyone really in the division. Coming to St Andrews, the way it's going to be packed out every week, and we've played so well there in terms of playing our game rather than adapting to what the opponents do. It feels wrong almost to say we're going to be pushing for promotion. We don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but
it's weird, isn't it? We're normally looking over our shoulders going into a championship season,
and you don't want to kind of change from what we are. I think if Blues fans said we've got to get in the top 6 and we won't be happy with anything else, that would kind of sound very spoilt, considering we haven't finished above 17th or whatever it is for the last 8 championship seasons or something. So you've kind of got to take into account. But I think this is almost the balance between the old Blues and the new Blues, of tempering expectations from what we have had and what we've now got, but also backing ourselves to think that why can't we go on and compete with the very best in the league?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you know, I'm doing my 1 to 24s in late July, and one of my processes for that is rating each team out of 10 on 14 different categories relative to the championship that I think that's going to determine their fate. So what I'm going to do is shout a category, and you can give me a number between 1 and 10.
Ryan, you go first, and I'll go after.
First category is ownership.
10.
10
Yeah,
for
10 for me
ownership.
as well.
Yeah, I agree. Infrastructure.
9.5. Like the facilities we've got 2 training grounds now. We've got massive facilities. We've got the fan park. We've got improved stadium stuff. The infrastructure of the club is fantastic now. So yeah, I don't know, 9.5.
Yeah,
I mean,
I think I'd agree with that. It would be a 10 if we were in the new stadium, I think. But yeah, we'll go with
might be an 11 then.
9.5 for infrastructure. Playing budget, that's got to be at least an 8, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think 9 for me.
9.
Yeah, I suppose in the context of what other clubs in the league can do, it's how much you sort of take into stock the parachute payments. Because we're not quite there, but the revenue is there, so it's a bit of a yeah. I don't know. Yeah, 9.
I think about
9.
an 8. Oh, you go a 9, would you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't know about you, Jay? You said 9, didn't you?
I can't think of, apart from the parachute teams, I can't think of any other teams in the league that will have a bigger budget than us. And then there's only parachute teams. You've got Ipswich, Southampton, who will definitely be strong in the market. Sheffield United will probably spend a fair amount as well. But then Leicester, you've got the issues there with their finances. So that probably ranks us in the top 5, maybe even top 4 in the division for budget. So I'd say 9.
Yeah, okay, let's go 9 then. Management.
I mean, so far it's a 9.5, isn't it? But
it's whether you take into account the fact
challenges to come.
The championship. Yeah.
I think it's difficult to know fully, as much as we've seen the tactical changes, and it's a lot harder a job than he was kind of given credit for, Chris Davies, in terms of what he had to do last season. I still think there's a little bit of you which thinks, let's see how you get on when you're not the absolute biggest fish and you've got a little bit of, you've got to adapt to different challenges, especially away from home in those bigger games.
I think it's an 8 for relative to the championship for now, but 10 in terms of what he's done so far, it's unquestionably a 10 out of 10. But I would go for an 8 if we're talking relative to the championship, just because of that slight unknown. But all signs positive.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough.
Okay, goalkeeping department.
Problem is, I've seen bits of Beta, but I haven't seen him fully. It's hard to, I don't know, maybe a 6.5. I don't know if I'm being harsh on the lads or sort of comparative with the rest of the division, but I don't think there's many great goalkeepers in the championship either. So maybe 6.5.
I think I'm between the 6 and the 7 as well. I think, even if you look at Allsop's championship history, it's not exactly been the most stellar career for him in at that level. And obviously there are still question marks with Beadle. So compared to some of the goalkeepers that are in there, you think Michael Cooper, Johansson, some of the keepers that are in there, I think we can't rank ourselves as high as we have some of the other categories. We'll wait and see.
Should we go 6.5 for now? Defence is the next one.
Thing is, I think Christian Bielik and Ethan Laird would start for over half the division, and they won't start for us in theory. So I'm tempted to say 8, maybe 8.5.
Yeah, I think I'd go along those lines. I think if you're talking solely about the defensive unit, then it's probably 8.5. But I think as a team, we are the defense kind of extends to everything. I think there was a quote that Ben from Blues Breakdown said to me that was from Not the Top 20 pod, where they said that we were an excellent defensive team last season that had enough going forwards. And I think we are, if we hadn't had so much of the ball because of us being the biggest fish, it would be more talked about that we are probably a better defensive team than we are a going forwards team at the moment. So I think an 8.5.
Okay, 8.5 for the defence. Midfield.
I mean, a Watapek and Doyle, that's comfortably a top 6 midfield. Comfortably. So 9, 8.5.
Yeah, I'd say 9 because I think at the moment, obviously, Leonard probably gets into at least probably the bottom 8 teams, maybe in midfield. Gardner-Hickman will probably play for a few as well. And then if we bring in another, I think, a 9 maybe.
Should we go for a 9 for midfield?
I'm saying so, yeah.
Okay. Attack.
Problem is we have to judge this on what we've got now rather than what we're expecting to come in. Which means if we're judging this now, I'm probably saying problem is we haven't got a right wing and we haven't got an attacking midfield, have we? Yeah. So in theory, it's a 6 based on the fact that we've probably got Anderson, Willemsen, Gray and Stansfield starting at the moment, which is, strong for the level. But if we're going to be challenging to where we want to challenge to, then we do
I think it needs a bit more creativity in those attacking areas.
If you're asking me in, let's say, a couple of, in a week's time or so, and we've potentially got, let's say, Fujimoto, Dow, Gray and Stansfield, or Stansfield, Dow, Gray and Kyogo, then you're probably looking at a 9. But I think for judging it on exactly what we've got now, then it's probably a 6, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd be between 6 and 7 as well, so I'm happy to go with 6.
Should we go with 6? Okay.
It sounds as if some dominoes are going to fall soon. So if you ask me in a week's time, then I might have a better answer.
Might be a 7 all right. Okay, so depth relative to this stage of the window.
Well, we got Allsop, Laird, Bielik, Peck Dorlawata, Gardner-Hickman, Anderson, Willemsen, May. Again, probably this stage of the window, maybe a 6. The guys we've got as depths at the moment are good enough.
Not even spoken about Alfie May, actually. So I think that shows that the squad is pretty not a lot got jam packed with options, but I think there's good players in reserve there.
I think we've got a lot of decent championship players there. A couple that are would be very good championship players for the right teams. Again, we've still got bodies to add. So you might ask me again in sort of a week or two's time, and the answer might be different. But for now, probably leaning towards a 7, maybe.
Yeah, I'd go with
6.5. Depends on the numbers, I suppose.
All right. Yeah. Should we go with a 7 for now?
Yeah, I'm just excluding Peacock Farrell from the conversation.
Squad stability is the next one.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've got down we're probably going to end up signing 11 footballers. So that means 14, 15 are staying. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yeah, probably sort of have. Yeah, we've probably got 12, 13 staying and 11 coming in, but obviously 2 of those might also be Dowland Davis if noise is correct. But obviously we don't know anything at the moment. So,
sure.
In terms of squad stability, you're probably going to have about 5 of those maybe starting early doors. So in theory, I don't know. I suppose it's a 6 by natural, isn't it? Like we're replacing half the starting 11 and half the squad. So stability wise, it's just obviously the guys that are staying are the guys that were very key players last year. So whether we get an extra bonus point for that, I don't know. But let's say a 6.
I'd challenge you on 6 and probably go a bit higher, just because I know this isn't strictly squad, but I think we're one of about 5 or 6 teams that are going in with the same manager and a manager that's been there for over 25 games or something like that and had a pre-season before.
Also, we're offloading players that might not necessarily have featured much last season, like Scott Wright, players that sort of might have been a bit more on the periphery as well, as opposed to players that were sort of key players in the team. So I think I'd probably go for should we say a 7 for squad stability?
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay. Next one is growth potential. So these are players that you think can grow and improve with the club and get a lot better.
Are the players? I was going to shout out 10 then, but if we're talking players, not club. To be fair, most of the players are. I don't know. Problem is, there's a couple I haven't seen, and most of them.
Squad, isn't it?
most of them are probably in that 26 to 29 bracket age-wise.
Should we go for 5 for growth potential?
I'd go a bit higher just because I think you've got a few in there. You've got like Laird, Cochrane, Doyle. I think even some of the older players, it's about them tactically as well, getting better understanding of the game and potentially new systems, being able to unlock different parts of them. Like I think Keshi Anderson hasn't shown up to this point in his championship career that he's a top winger, but he could still go on this season to grow into a top winger just because of the system and the fact he's in a better fitness place.
So should we say a 6 for growth potential?
Yeah.
6. Okay. Next one is team spirit. That's going to be very high, isn't it? Team spirit.
9.
9.
Yeah, I'd say 9 or 10.
Weirdly, they strike me as a bunch that get out. And I mean, obviously, like we've had Clara in South Korea this summer, sort of just having a holiday with Peck. But it comes across more like it's not sort of a Ian Holloway, everyone loves each other and they're out on the piss every other Wednesday kind of thing. It seems more it seems more of a very sort of professional relationship that they all kind of get on in that sense. They all sort of understand each other kind of thing. So I suppose
they go for sushi together every Wednesday. Fitness is the next one.
10
for fitness, of
I
course.
mean, I don't know. I suppose maybe 9.5 if we're looking at Anderson and Laird, but we've got Tom. For those that are listening that want to know, we've got Tom Brady, and he's brought his fitness people in to support with our our levels of fitness. Basically, obviously, we had numerous players play over 50 games last season, so you've got to put it up there as 9.5, 10, I think, because the facilities are there, the coaches are there, the personal training is there.
Yeah,
they've got proper structures and processes in place, which I'm guessing a lot of professional clubs will have. But I think we are at a level where we will be, if not the fittest team in the league, certainly amongst the fittest teams in the league.
100%. And finally, quality is the last one.
9.
I think 8 for now. I'd probably say.
Yeah, I'd say 8, but I think we've got match winners, but I'm not sure if we lined up right now with the players we've got for the first 10 games. I'd still think there might be games where we can't find the breakthrough enough to make it a draw into a win or a loss into a draw. I think we still want a little bit more in terms of that.
Yeah,
that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah, I think creativity is a big thing between now and the end of the window, but I'm very confident that that's going to be forthcoming. So some final.
I immediately looked at the defensive midfield and just got excited.
Oh, I know, yeah, taking a water, the 10 on its own. So some final quick fire questions from me then, gents. What's the biggest reason to believe in Birmingham City right now?
Money. Let's call it what it is.
Spoken like a true poet, right?
the revenue's there, the fan base is there. Documentary following, players are earning decent money. We're going to spend decent money. The reason we're going to be in this position is because I think, as Tom Wagner's laid out, if you've got the money of a parachute payment club in your back pocket, then you've got a 1 in 4 chance of winning promotion. And we have that revenue and that money available to spend. So ultimately, money is the reason that we are in a position where we can believe, because that money has helped us bring in everything else alongside it, such as the manager, the facilities, the players, and so on. So let's call it what it is. The money helps.
Of course. Biggest reason for doubt?
Ooh. I'm going to say speed of progression catching up with you, potentially. Just because Ipswich, obviously, they were very close in the end in terms of how close it was between them and Leeds, and potentially you could fall on the wrong side of that, say, and then, a few results might not go your way, just because like Ryan mentioned, we didn't have a lot of time on the training pitch last season, so there may be elements of the game which are still not exactly what Chris Davies wants. Still think there could be availability issues in terms of the amount of games we played last year, taking its toll on some of the squad. I'm going to say just the speed at which we're progressing for me.
Okay, and finally, too early for prediction, but give me a rough feel for where you think next season might be heading.
Automatics.
Autos, right. Gone big.
Let's do it.
He's doing it. What are you saying, James?
I'm going to say we will be in the bunch for automatic. So even if we end up being like Sunderland, where you're not in the conversation come the end of the season, you fall away a little bit. I think if we're in the playoffs, we won't sneak in. I think we'll have been in there for a while.
There you have it.
That's a sensible answer. I'll probably go with that one.
I'll let you take all the stick.
Well, listen, gents, thanks so much for joining us to discuss Birmingham City. A really exciting time for the club. Some fantastic content these gents produce on Birmingham City as well, so you can give both of them a follow as well, James and Ryan. You can also subscribe to EFL Debate on YouTube and on Spotify, and we'll see you again for another summer deep dive very soon.